Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am here today at the IMT, the Institute of Military Technology, looking at an extremely cool product from Knight's Armament. This is their revolving rifle, or as they call it, R-squared revolving rifle. And I think there's a lot of internet lore about this gun, and today we're going to take a look at some of the reality behind it. We're going to pull it apart, such as it can be disassembled, and give you some of the backstory. So, like I said, this was developed by Knight's Armament in response to a request from a specific, not-to-be-named special operations sort of organization that had a requirement to, they wanted a firearm that would be essentially completely silent, or as close as you can practically get to completely silent with a firearm. It had to meet an accuracy requirement of 1.5 inches at 100 yards, which is not a trivial accuracy requirement, especially for a subsonic, essentially silent gun. Had to be able to operate at night, hence we have the Simrad night vision scope on here. Had to be easily transportable. This breaks down so all the components will fit together into a briefcase. And it had to not leave brass when firing. And when you put these requirements together, well, really the only way to 100% reliably not leave brass without depending on the shooter having the situational awareness and opportunity to pick up their brass is to use a revolver. So that's where this project started. And by the way, this takes place in the early 1990s. So, okay, so in order to be a repeating firearm that doesn't leave brass, has to be a revolver. Now, how do you silence a revolver? Well, you have to seal the cylinder gap, the space between the cylinder and the barrel right here. I know a lot of people right now are frantically typing out the word Nagant in the comments because this is, of course, a fantastic example of a suppressible revolver. The Nagant 1895 Russian Nagant uses a brass case that is actually a little bit longer than the cylinder, and the cylinder cams forward so that the brass case covers that gap with the barrel. And the Nagant did this so that they wouldn't lose powder and muzzle velocity to pressure venting from that cylinder gap. Wasn't actually intended to be suppressed. But the problem is you can't really do that on a modern revolver platform unless you actually want to build these guns on vintage 1895 Nagants, which wasn't really an option. This is built on a Ruger Redhawk, 44 Magnum Ruger Redhawk. Instead, what Knights did was come up with a totally custom cartridge that essentially has a sub-caliber bullet. These were made, incidentally, in both 30 caliber and 7mm, with a sub-caliber bullet inside of an aluminum sabot. The aluminum slides forward just slightly, we're talking like 20,000ths of an inch, with an O-ring on the front surface of the sabot that seals against the face of the barrel when it's under pressure from firing. So the idea is the cartridge is just the same length as the overall cylinder length. When you fire it, it presses up against the barrel, seals the cylinder gap, so you don't get any noise coming out there. And then as soon as pressure has vented, the bullet's left the barrel. Without pressure, that O-ring recedes slightly, and you, again, get a cylinder gap so that you can actually cycle the cylinder around and move to the next cartridge and fire again. A very clever system that actually caused some real problems for meeting the accuracy requirement. Like, there's a lot more to this gun than just take revolver, put on stock bipod and suppressor, and presto, you're done. So before we talk about specifically what went into tuning the accuracy to make this meet requirements, let's take a closer look. Let me pull this one apart. Actually, we have a second one we can pull apart as well and show you how it disassembles and what it looks like up close. So here is the whole package. Essentially, we have revolver frame. We've got a stock assembly that attaches over the original grip area of the revolver frame. New handguard that has just a basic Harris bipod. Like, Harris is the gold standard of collapsing or folding bipods. That's what they used here. A really nice long suppressor. The barrel comes to about here. We'll take it apart in just a moment. And then scope mounts. This has a loopholed Vari-X 3 scope, 1.5 to 5 power. So one of the early LPVOs, which is really good for the sort of 100-yard or so expected operating range. And then this is what's called a SIMRAD. This is a clip-on night vision scope, so it's got a cover on it right now. This is a fairly early generation technology of night vision scope, but it clamps on over the scope, and when this is turned on, you actually see its field of view superimposed over what you see through the regular scope. Now I have this second example here, and this is the one we're going to disassemble just because it doesn't have a big scope already attached to it. So we'll start at the back end here. There's a lever in the buttstock. Pop that out, and then this unscrews. You'll notice this is a 7mm example, and this has a long bolt connecting into the back of the frame. And there we go. This assembly lifts off. There's a little insert to take up space and a screw attachment for the buttstock right there. Then for the suppressor, we're actually going to take this threaded locking nut and just unscrew it. This is fixed to the frame of the revolver, and the suppressor threads into it. There we go. I can take that, slide it off. Now this example actually does have a ported barrel. The first one that we were looking at earlier actually does not have a ported barrel. There's a fair amount of variation between the different examples of these because, well, they were pretty low production, and they experimented with a number of different concepts, different details on the different guns. Obviously, you can see this also has scope mounts on it here. They left the rear sight on the revolver. In fact, they actually gave it a slightly higher rear sight, which could be used with a front sight mounted on the suppressor. Because the suppressor is keyed so that it's always in the same orientation, you can put a front sight out on the suppressor. And then that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a regular Ruger Redhawk 44 Magnum. The chambers have been bored out to fit, basically cylindrically, to fit this specialized sabot ammunition. You can see this is marked off here because rotating the suppressor nut this way removes it. And so there's the whole package disassembled. As you can see, the suppressor's the longest piece. Barrel comes out to here. With this level of volume in the suppressor, it's a very quiet gun, although I don't have any specific decibel numbers for you. Muzzle velocity is right about 1,000, 950, 1,000 feet per second, right under the speed of sound to keep it subsonic. Whole thing packs together easily into a briefcase. This is a very sneaky, covert sort of custom firearm. So during development here, a lot of this process was pretty easy. Making the suppressor, no big deal. Attaching a stock to a revolver is simple. It was the accuracy that was really the problem for Knights. Originally, when they designed the cartridge, they used plastic sabots, kind of natural, that's what you'd use. The bullets, by the way, the 30 caliber bullets were a special alloy. They were designed to be bullets that would cause a significant amount of terminal damage, not like plain FMJ, think hunting style bullets. You want this to actually kill what it hits. The 7mm bullets were just very long, good ballistic 7mm bullets. At any rate, originally the cartridge design uses plastic sabots, and they work great. Functionally, mechanically, the problem is there's just way too much flex in them, and they will present bullets at slightly different positions in the end of the barrel each time you fire, and it made it impossible to meet a pretty stringent 1.5 MOA accuracy requirement. What they ended up having to do was switch to machined aluminum sabots, and they had to use 70-75 aluminum to be strong enough to withstand the pressure, and these things had to be corrosion resistant. So they had to actually go in and anodize, well, originally anodize the sabots to make them, protect them from wear and degradation before they actually get used. Well, the problem is the machining, the accuracy requirements in machining these sabots were so tight that when they anodized them, a lot of times they'd actually end up out of spec because of the anodization. So they had to go to an alternative finishing method, which finally allowed them to get to a place where they could have a repeatable bullet presentation into the barrel to get that 1.5 MOA accuracy requirement, which they did ultimately get. Took like 6 months of development tinkering on basically just on the sabot and that cartridge. Ultimately, about 100 of these guns were made, and they were actually made for 2 different customers, although they're not willing to tell me exactly who those customers were, but one of them wanted 30 caliber guns, one of them wanted 7mm guns. Today, there are just a couple of the examples like this one still here at Knights, but they're a really cool problem to be solved in a way. You know, one is tempted to look at this and say, oh, that'd be a really cool gun to reproduce because, hey, it's simple. Like you just take a regularly available Ruger revolver and stick a suppressor in a stock. Well, the problem is, in order to make it suppressible without the cylinder gap, you have to go through this process with the customized ammunition, which you could certainly do, but it is not going to be a cheap or readily, easily shootable gun. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. It was really cool to get access to not 1, but 2 of these here at the IMT to be able to show to you guys. So thank you very much for watching.